class, Abraham Maimonides. As you are probably aware, as maybe not, but in that case, if not, then I'll tell you now. Abraham Maimonides was the son of Moses Maimonides, our friend from very recent. And let's look at his life. This class is going to be very unusual. I mean, this is going to show to most of you a type of Judaism that you might not have even expected to exist. A very interesting style. Now we'll go to the first slide. And we see here his name in Arabic first. In Arabic, it's Ibrahim ibn Musa, which means the son of Moses. Ibn Maimon, which is the Maimonides, basically. In English, or in Hebrew, Abraham ben Moshe ben Maimon, also known as Abraham Maimonides. That's what I'm going to call him mostly, and sometimes I'm going to call him Rabbeinu Abraham, which means our teacher Abraham. And of course, that was a common name for him, used by, of course, his followers. His followers called him that, and because he was their teacher. Okay, he was born in Fustat and he died in Fustat. Born in 1186, died in 1237. So that's the 13th century. His father, as we now know quite well, Moses Maimonides, also known as the Rambam, had prayed very long for a child, and finally, after giving up all hope, he became a father at the age of 48. That's on the late side for a father. And of course, if that happens to you, your father is not necessarily around for a very big chunk of your life. So what happened was, when Abraham was 15 years old, no, he didn't die yet, but wrote the following letter.
When I consider the state of the world, only two things give me comfort: my studies and contemplation, and my son Abraham, to whom God, may he be exalted, has granted grace and blessings from the blessings of his namesake.
By the way, his namesake is somebody with the same name, right? What's the famous Abraham?
Would that be the one, like the Abraham from the Old Testament Abraham?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what he was. So may God grant him grace and blessings from the blessings of our father Abraham, basically, because it said in the Bible that God will bless, all the nations will be blessed through you, to Abraham. So he's basically referring to the patriarch, what we call Abraham. Yeah, good. At least you didn't say Abraham Lincoln. Okay.
May he grant him length of days, for he is the most humble and modest person, and he has noble qualities, with a keen intellect and a good nature. With God's help, he will no doubt attain eminence among the great. I pray that God, may he be exalted, watch over him, and bestow his goodness upon him.
Well, that's so sweet, right? It's like an older father. He's so proud of his son, and he says his son is really, everybody loves his son, but my son is very special. He's very smart. He's very kind. It's really what everybody wants from their son. Okay, yeah.
Another rare glimpse of Abraham's youth is found in the following letter by someone who delivered a message to the house of Maimonides.
I know, this is amazing. I love this so much. Okay, yeah. This is the beginning of the letter. It's found in the same dumpster that I talked about in Cairo. All these old letters, handwritten stuff. Amazing. Maybe I'll teach about it. I'm not sure. It all depends. But yes, the first, the name that is, there's two Arabic names that's about Jews, but one is called Fakhr, but anything close to that will do. That's fine. And the other is called El Jalal. El Jalal is actually the name of a young boy. Okay.
So Fakhr, may God protect him, went with us when we set out for Rabbi Moses' house. But he preferred to stay at the entrance to the house while El Jalal and I entered.
Yeah.
I kissed his noble hand, and he received us with a most cordial welcome. He said to me, "Come and be seated, young man," beckoning me to sit on one side of the parlor opposite where he himself was seated. So he sat down while he read the message which I had given him from beginning to end. He was delighted with the presents and started to play with Al-Jajal, yeah, may God protect him. There was no one else seated in the parlor except he, Rabbi Abraham, and me.
Yeah, so funny that this Maimonides we talked about, it's all these amazing, well, a strong leader, amazing scholar, a brain like as big as anyone can imagine, starts playing with a young boy. So he was, you see a little bit, this is maybe the only little testament that we found of testimony of a playful kind, Maimonides who actually kidding with children. Yeah.
Hmm. Then there transpired something that a book could not describe. Caskets were brought, and he began to eat lemon cakes. We stayed for a while, but he kept me in order that we speak a moment confidentially.
Yeah.
The master seemed favorably inclined. In the meantime, Rabbi Abraham, may God protect him, had taught Jalal a
Yeah.
greeting with which to address Rabbi
So
Moses.
maybe something like a very fancy greeting, like "Oh, most eminent scholar of scholars" or something like that. And so that was very cute from this mouth of the little boy.
Hmm. When he repeated it, he laughed with amusement and joked with the child.
Yeah. Oh, wait, sorry.
I was the first to leave the house, while Al-Jalal remained behind, talking to the usher in the vestibule. Rabbi Moses asked Rabbi Abraham, "Where has his son gone?" "He's staying by the door," he asked. "Go and call him," he said while going back in. Then he came across the child again, then he came across the child who again recited the greeting.
Yeah, I
Peace.
say again says it, and Maimonides got a kick out of it. Actually wants a child back to because it's with her, and the child obviously feels so comfortable that he's talking to the butler or whatever. Yeah, so they must have been very cute. I found a very cute photo of a cute boy, I think. Okay, good. Yes, so Maimonides taught Abraham rabbinic law. He taught, so Maimonides was Abraham's most prominent teacher. He taught him also medicine and philosophy, mostly from his own book, The Guide of the Perplexed, that we mentioned the class before. So it's interesting. You can have your own textbook. If you write your own textbook, your own book, you can actually use it for studies. Okay. Then when Maimonides died, Abraham was only 19 years old. So that's sad, you know. But Abraham was already acknowledged as the great scholar in the community. When he was 19 years old, he inherited his father's position. First as the physician of the Sultan. Can you imagine? Like a doctor, 19-year-old doctor, and then the most prominent doctor of the empire. And a few years later, he was already taking over position, but a few years later, he was then officially appointed as the Nagid, which is the term for the leader of the Jewish community. So, would you like to read a little more?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, great.
A Muslim medical historian, Ibn Abi
Shall I,
Usaybiya.
shall I say it one time?
Yes, thank you.
Ibn Abi Usaybi'ah.
Ibn Abi Usaybiya.
Wow, good.
Sorry. Okay. Described him. He was a celebrated physician, learned in the art of medicine and skilled in its practice. He worked in the service of the ruler Al-Kamil. He also frequently left the royal palace to tend to the sick in the hospital of Cairo. I met him in Cairo during my medical appointment in the hospital in the year 631, and found him to be a tall gentleman, slender in build and refined in manners, elegant in conversation, and outstanding as a physician.
So he was really well respected, also obviously by this Muslim very prominent doctor. The year 631 is obviously from the Islamic calendar, so it was the common era 1234. Mm-hmm.
His busy work as a doctor did not make his life as a rabbi very easy. Here is a letter by someone who had asked Rabbi Abraham several questions. As for your answers to your inquiries, when I handed over your first question to our Lord, the head, he was tending to the sick of Cairo and Fustat, working in the hospital day and night and day without taking a break for more than 2 nights a week, continuously visiting on those 2 nights the Jewish and the Muslim sick by candlelight until midnight. Whenever I met with him, I asked him to attend to it, and he would excuse himself by saying, "Yes, when I am free."
Yeah, and so that's what I tell my wife when she asks me to do something. Yeah, when I'm done with these classes. Yeah, but so he's very, very busy and working hard. But this is only his medical job. He also leader of the community, spiritual leader, etc. Yeah. So toward the end of his father's life and shortly after, some of Maimonides' Arabic writings were translated into Hebrew. And so they became available for the non-Arabic speaking Jewish community. So I alluded to that a few times, that at the time when more and more Jews fled from the Almohads to Christian lands, that these basically Arabic Jews now joined the Jews of Christendom, and there was a culture shock. So they saw that these people didn't know about that philosophy. So people from the Arabic background started translating this book into Hebrew so that other Jews would read it too. And that's what happens here with Maimonides' teachings. And then most Jews who were living in the Christian world were not accustomed to philosophy. And so their minds could not accept its teaching. What is this? It's not that's not our culture. Okay, during a fierce conflict, maybe read this, Samantha.
Sure. During a fierce conflict that lasted for years, opponents of Maimonides' philosophical teachings approached representatives of the Catholic Church. They requested them to burn Maimonides' books, to which they gladly obliged.
Yeah, and this is called this is part of what we call the Maimonidean controversy, and that's the next probably two classes. There's a lot of things happening in those there. So there's scheduled one, but I think last time I wasn't able to do it in one, so it's probably going to be two classes, and I'll shift the topics around a bit. But this is what is all connected to. Yeah.
In response to this incident, Abraham wrote a book called The Wars of the Lord, in which he adamantly condemned the ones who opposed his father's philosophy. One of the main points of criticism by Maimonides' opponents was his condemnation of anyone who believes that God has anthropomorphic features. Another point of criticism was Maimonides' teaching that certain texts should be explained metaphorically. In his response, Abraham writes,
Yeah. Oh,
Abraham
I
teaches
see what
that
you're
belief.
saying.
Oh, sorry.
Abraham writes. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So, you people of God and his heritage, you know that God made humans different from animals because of the reason and wisdom and understanding that he gave them. Also, he made Israel different from the Gentiles by giving them the Torah and the commandments. Therefore, the reason came before the Torah, both in the history of the world and in the people that live in it. Reason has been given to mankind since creation. The Torah was given 4,448 years after creation.
This is based on their idea of history, of course. But the point is, the reason is before Torah, and also for us humans, it should become before Torah. So then, when the Torah is given, and to us in our life, I mean, we have some, as a child, when we grow up, we get some sense of reason. Um, we experience gravity when we're learning to walk, when we're a little young and we fall and we hurt ourselves. Oh, so then we know, and we know that if we stick our finger in the flame, that it hurts. There's all these kind of things that you find out that before you learn Torah. So the reason comes before Torah. Therefore, you have to study Torah in the light of reason. Yeah.
Should anyone say to you, but the sages have explained that the Torah was created 2,000 years before the world, you should answer that this story, this midrash, needs many commentaries to explain it properly. This cannot be taken in its simple sense.
Yeah. So he's saying that is not a literal thing. That is a reflection of a thought, of a message, which I would take time to explain, but don't take this literally.
Reason was implanted in each and every person within the people of Israel before their knowledge of the Torah. This is the reason why, when a child's mental capacity is not yet ripe, God does not oblige him to fulfill the commandments.
Yeah, so you need time to prepare, to understand, and then when you have the knowledge and the understanding, and then you have to keep abide by all the laws and regulations. Yeah.
The exalted and extolled one cannot be seen by the eye or understood by his creatures through physical senses, because they can only comprehend bodies.
Mm-hmm.
All the plain statements in Scripture and in Midrash about this matter must obviously be understood in a figurative sense, because they are full of hidden meanings.
Yeah, okay. And then?
Word has come to us and our forefathers that many people overseas who live on islands and far corners of the earth err in this fundamental principle. They interpret these scriptural verses and allegorical passages literally. For this our heart is faint, and for these things our eyes are dim, and our forefathers were alarmed. How can such impurity occur in Israel?
Yeah, basically, he's talking about rabbinical teachings, but also about biblical statements. He says a lot of these things cannot be taken literally. It's exactly what his father said, and he really follows very much in the footsteps of his father. Very loyal to his father's teachings and defending it. That was the whole point, that this was common knowledge and common insight, basically in among Arabic Jews, but not at all among the Jews of Christian lands, up till basically through, we saw that with Rashi, that he uses a lot of midrash in his commentaries. Only his grandson started taking this in, and that didn't last very long. It took like a few generations, and then they went back to the old style, non-rational interpretation of texts. But so, and why the grandson of Rashi, the Rashbam, why he went the rational route is also because of he became exposed to these translators and to Jews of Arabic lands around this time. This is about the time of Maimonides, basically. So thank you so much. It was wonderful to hear you again, Samantha, after so long. I'm going to go to someone else. Is Makaya here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hello, Makaya. We have read this. Go to the next slide. If you agree on reading, then I'd be very happy.
It is like the impurity of idol worships, of people who serve idols, who deny the Torah, and who serve other gods besides him. A person who introspects will recognize the insanity of thinking that the Creator is corporeal, or that he has a likeness or a specific place, because such insanity only comes from a person who does not know him.
If somebody's in he says that if this is like idol worship, why? Because if you make an image of God in your mind, you imagine him with a body or with a location or with any kind of an image, then you're then you're worshiping the image that you create in your mind, and which is not the real God. So it's like an idol is you worship something that you created in an image, and you worship that instead of the real God, instead of God. The same as if you think you have you worship the God of the Bible, but then you still have an image, and that's like creating an idol, but not in physicality, but in your thoughts. So he says that's the same thing. Mm-hmm.
He who does not know him denies the real him. His service and his prayers are not directly to the Creator of the world, the God of heaven and earth.
Yeah, that's a very bold statement.
Such a person does not serve him, but only his shadow, like those who serve demons. As our Talmudic sages said, they serve their shadows, that entity that they perceive as corporeal, with height or with a specific place where he sits on a throne, does not exist at all. It is regarding such fools and others like them that the prophet says, he has shut their eyes so that they cannot see, and their hearts that they cannot understand.
Now it happens.
The news was spread in our country that the works of my father, the God of the perplexed, and the Book of Knowledge were burned by one faction of the people in Montpellier through the power of Christian authorities who assisted them, because these books dispute their faith and reveal the falsehood of their viewpoint. They were undoubtedly assisted by the Christians because their belief is not so distant from theirs.
Now, this is a very stingy remark. This is words of the Lord but it's like a sword. The book is called The Words of the Lord, where he writes this. It's like a sword stabbing somebody, right? So, yeah, they were helped by these Christians because they believe basically the same thing. Christians believe that God took on a body in Jesus, right? Um, but he says, but you Christians, you Jews from these in these lands, you take these metaphors the same. You are upset because my father said condemn this. So you're really on the same level as these Christians. Now he actually goes on. This is very interesting.
Abraham Maimonides compares the mistaken concept of God held by these Jewish opponents who lived in Christian lands, on the one hand, with, on the other hand, the pure concept of God among Jews in Muslim lands and even among Muslims.
This is on. I usually ask a question about this, so pay attention. What he's saying that basically the Jews who live in Christian lands are less monotheistic than the Muslims. So, I mean, the Jews had, of course, these people, that would be an insult to Jews. But he said, because like the Jews who live in Muslim lands and the Muslims themselves, we have a pure concept of God's oneness. We don't think he has a body. We don't think all the things. But
Wouldn't that be
it
because
seems that you do.
Muslims,
What?
wouldn't that be because Muslims themselves are monotheistic?
Yeah, they also have the same idea as about God as Maimonides, basically, and Abraham Maimonides as the philosophical. So, at least according to Abraham Maimonides, even Muslims do. They only believe in one God, and they do not believe God has a body, and that you cannot imagine him in a body, etc., etc., and that God sitting on a throne is metaphor. But he contrasts that with the Jews from Christian lands who might take these things literally and some of them would say God has a body. It says it, so why not? Yeah, of course. He's talking about not all the. We saw that that was what the Almohads believed. That's probably what the Jews, the Muslims in Egypt believed, that Abraham grew up among. We saw that there was a group of Muslims, the Almoravids, who actually did take this more literally, and therefore they were seen by the Almohads as also as idol worshippers. So exactly the contradiction between the Almohads against the Almoravids is the same as between Abraham Maimonides now and those people who were upset with Maimonides and had his books burned. The same contradiction. Okay.
No Israelite who lives from the easternmost corner to the westernmost corner of the land of the Ishmaelites is in doubt about this matter. Even the Ishmaelites accepted this faith from the Israelites and built the fundamental principles of their religion on it.
Do you remember what Ishmaelites are?
No.
Okay. So Abraham had two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. Isaac is the father of the Jews. Ishmael is the father of the Arabs, supposedly. So Ishmael or Ishmaelites stands for Arabs. But then in the Middle Ages, it also, when people say Ishmaelites, just also meant Muslims in general, even non-Arabic Muslims, Persians, Turks, etc. But this is just a rabbinical way of saying Muslims most of the time. Yeah?
Yeah.
So he's basically saying that Islam took the idea of monotheism from the Israelites, from the original Jews. That's a big thesis that he believes, that a lot of things in Islam are from a pure form of Judaism, that some of it has been lost, but okay, we'll see about that. But monotheism is one of it. Okay.
They repented from the folly and stupidity of their ancestors who used to worship idols and erred in the unity of his name and his greatness. As it is written, nations shall come to you from the ends of the earth, and they shall say, surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanity, and harmful concepts.
Yeah, there are prophecies in the Hebrew Bible that other nations, non-Jews, so say, will actually turn to Jews for inspiration and saying, "Oh, monotheism, Jewish, interesting," and then take on these principles. Mm-hmm.
The same was said to one of the prophets, from the rising of the sun unto the place where it does down, is my name great among the nations. Their service is to truly believe in the unity of his name, as it is written, and in every place incense is burned and offerings are made unto my name and a pure offering.
Yeah, this is interesting. Maybe these texts are to support this idea that other nations were supposed to predicted to adopt certain concepts from Judaism, and I said that's exactly what happened in Islam. Yeah,
He who disagrees and says that the Creator, may he be exalted and praised, has a likeness or bodily form, or that he is located in space, denies the truth about his Creator by attributing form to him. Therefore he is a heretic, and he has no portion in the world to come.
yeah. Anyone who says that God has a location, has a body, or any form is dismissed from the hereafter. Basically, we saw what Maimonides said about hereafter, right? He really didn't say believe so much in hell, but more in just you don't keep living. Okay. Yeah, maybe we'll take some more turns, but maybe finish this one and then I'll go to someone else.
Okay. Abraham wrote several books, some of which have been rediscovered in recent history. One of these, of which not all parts have been found, is Comprehensive Guide for the Servants of God.
Yeah, in Arabic, Kitab Kifayat al-Abidin. But this is an okay translation. That's how people translate it often. Comprehensive Guide for the Servants of God. Thank you so much, Makaya. Good to hear your voice. Is Natalie here?
Hi, I'm here.
Natalie, good to hear you. We'll go to the next slide if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay.
Among all the things that Abraham Maimonides did, a few things stand out that he worked to accomplish, unifying the community. We can see in the city of Fustat two well-known synagogues. One is called the Iraqis. Its custom in praying and Torah reading is like the custom of old exiles. The second is called the Palestinians, Shamian.
Shamiyin. You know the word shami, no?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Shami means basically Syrian, but Palestine, the land of Israel, was considered as part of Greater Syria. So the Shamis, basically.
Its custom is different from any other. In the one, they read the Torah according to the annual schedule, in the other according to the triennial schedule.
Triannual, I guess.
Triennial.
Yeah.
In the one synagogue, they stand for certain prayer, in the other they sit. And there are differences in many other particulars. My father and teacher, may the memory of the pious be a blessing, used to censor this, but the most evil ordered him to be quiet. Another scholar cried out in protest, but to no avail. We are the ones who, at the beginning of our leadership, united the custom of the two synagogues.
Yeah, so I don't know. This is when you have Maimonides and his son too. They're so into structuring things that they seem to have a problem with differences. So this is something I'm not so enthusiastic about. I mean, this was an old tradition. The Palestinian Jews who read triannual schedule, mean they read the Torah in 3 years. So that means it's much shorter. And every I think it's 3.5 years, so twice in 7 years, but I'm not 100% sure because I've never seen that actual schedule, if it's at all still known what the division is. But they would smaller portions, which is okay. I mean, that was the time of, we spoke about Yanai, the poet, right? So that was what happened there. But what's interesting, if smaller portions, you can think about it more. But some reason Maimonides had a problem with two different communities that did things differently. And he tried to censor it and to stop it, but then people were outraged, and so he couldn't. Now, Abraham says, we are the ones, means I was the one, who when I started to lead the community, I united the custom of the two communities. So basically, that was the end of the old Palestinian tradition, at least in Egypt, and most likely soon everywhere else, because most of them live there. I mean, it's a shame, I think. I wish that still existed, but it doesn't. Thank you, Maimonides. Okay.
A reformation of the prayer service, or rather restoration of old practices.
Well, he's reforming the prayer service, and he says it is a restoration of old practices, but people differed in opinion. But it's a very interesting, this reformation, this reform of the prayer service that he does. So what is one of the things that he introduced?
Washing hands and feet. A person should always wash his hands and feet before praying. Maimonides had taught, hands should always be washed before prayer and the feet only in the morning, unless they get dirty in the meantime.
So yeah, that's what Maimonides. If you wash your feet in the morning, but you're only indoors after that, you wear slippers or shoes, and they don't get, then you don't have to repeat that. But Abraham said, well, it's proper to do. Of course, this is very much like what the Muslims did. Okay.
Praying without shoes. Maimonides had ruled only in lands where the custom is to wear footwear in the presence of honored individuals is it allowed to wear shoes during prayer. Abraham taught that it is always proper to remove one's shoes before prayer.
So even Maimonides said, yeah, of course you take off our shoes, but there are these lands where it's cold and people always wear shoes, and they don't even take out their shoes when they enter their own home, but even when they enter the presence of their kings. Can you believe it? Well, if that is really how they think, if that is just as respectful to them, then in their mind, it's also respectful enough to keep their shoes on while they pray. So in those lands, I guess it's okay. Abraham says, well, I don't think it's okay. It's always good, because why? In the time of the temple, people all took their shoes off before entering the temple. And so it actually brings you in another, it's an awareness, basically. He said, no, always take off your shoes. Yeah? Seating arrangements.
Originally in Sephardi synagogues, people did not sit facing the ark, facing Jerusalem, but instead they sat on the floor sideways, leaning against the wall.
Yeah, and still in many traditional Sephardi synagogues, even there are benches now, as far as I know, everywhere. But they're still not facing the ark. They're still with the back to the side. See, as the photo with the blue, this is a Tunisia. But that's a traditional seating arrangements in Sephardi synagogues, and so in Arabic synagogues and stuff. Yeah.
Except when the central prayer is said, they stand up and face Jerusalem.
Yeah, so then it's like the same as in Ashkenazi synagogues.
Abraham and Maimonides, however, taught they should sit in neat rows, always facing the Qibla, like a servant sitting in front of his master.
Yeah, so Qibla is an Arabic word, and it really means the direction that you pray to. So for Muslims, the Qibla is the Kaaba in Mecca. For Jews, the Qibla is Jerusalem. But that's called the Qibla. So if you go to a Samaritan and you say, what is your Qibla? Then they would immediately know, our Qibla is Mount Gerizim, because they have a very small community with their own Qibla, with their own holy center on a mountain in the north of Israel. So that's like that's what Qibla means. But you sit on the ground, according to him, face just like Muslims here in the mosque, facing like a servant sitting in front of his master, facing Jerusalem, basically, for a Jew. Yeah.
This
is what he writes. Mm-hmm.
They sit for the hymns of praise and for the blessings of Shema in fear and awe, their faces toward the holy ark, which is in the direction of the land of Israel and Jerusalem and the temple of the Lord. They take it upon themselves to stand in the same direction in which they stand for the main prayer, towards Jerusalem.
Yeah, so the direction that you face when you stand would be the direction that you face when you sit. Yeah.
Furthermore, prostration, bowing down, is an essential part of prayer and dictated by Jewish law.
Yeah. What does he say about that?
They bow down to the ground and prostrate in the Kaddish and Kedusha, and many of them bow down to the ground whenever they feel overcome with humility and great concentration. So too they prostrate instead of bowing from the waist at the beginning and the end of the forefathers' blessing and the Thanksgiving blessing, which are part of the main prayer. Are they saying that?
Yeah, sorry. What?
Is he talking about the Amidah, the forefathers' blessing?
Exactly. So the Amidah means a standing prayer, but for him, and that's really an old custom, it's true, for him, because we saw when we read the Apocalypse of Zerubbabel, that somebody said, an angel came and grabbed me because I was praying during the whole prayer and I was prostrate. Meaning this is prostrate. There's a whole, what we call the Amidah, the standing prayer, wasn't really standing. So, but the whole thing is very, there were different traditions, but some people bowed. There was a lot more spontaneity. People bowed, people did this, people stood, people prostrated fully or halfway, stuff like that, sitting on the ground, standing. But he brings it in because, well, there's many texts in the Bible that says we bow down to you, right? That is really, this is what that text is called. Now we pray it in our words, but we don't in Jewish liturgy. Usually we do not. There's no prostration, but he reintroduced it on all these occasions. Yeah.
Likewise, they may prostrate at certain moments, even in the hymns of prayer, during the blessings of the Shema and other blessings of the main prayer. In short, they view their bowings and prostrations as a sign of concentration.
Yeah. Hymns of praise. That is what you call the Zemirot, or what's it called? Ashkenazim call it Pirkei de Zimra, right? So that's really what that is. So when you feel overcome, when you really concentrate on the word, and there is a prayer of submission to God or praising God or stuff like that, some people will do that. So this is pretty. It's really interesting that he's so bothered that in some synagogues the Iraqis, so to say, the Babylonians, that is, right, would sit or stand, and in the Shami, in the Palestinian synagogues, they would sit. So it's not all the same. So my question was, so he can't tolerate any differences, but here it's like strange because he introduces these prostrations, but some people stand and some people might feel like sitting and some people like bow down. And so there is spontaneity, and not everybody does exactly the same. And there he doesn't have a problem. So why would it be the problem? That's my feeling. If people, the Palestinian old style Judaism would have differences, well, what's the big deal? Okay, fine, but okay. But this is very interesting, right? Now there are many people are opposed to these reforms. There's a number of counter arguments. The first people said this is bid'ah. Now, bid'ah is one of these tongue twisters or throat scratchers. Bid'ah is an Arabic word. You want to read the text?
Sure. However, many oppose these reforms, saying this is bid'ah. A petition was signed by 200 people in which Rabbeinu Abraham was accused of bid'ah, an Arabic term which means religious innovation. In our day and age, innovation sounds like something positive, but in Islamic thought, bid'ah is grave sin. The accusation basically means that you are changing the revealed religion and that you make up your own. Once again, we see that no matter when and where they lived, Jews to some extent internalized concept from their surrounding cultures.
Yeah, the term bid'ah never came up in Ashkenazi lands, and you see that basically what Rabbeinu Tam did with this changing the tefillin, right? There was no precedent for that, so that would be bid'ah. But nobody in Ashkenazi lands had the concept of bid'ah. You know, oh, it's called a hidush. It's like, oh, there's a new insight. That's actually hidush and bid'ah. It's like hidush is like a positive thing. Oh, there's a new idea, but bid'ah is something very, very. You shouldn't innovate. Yeah, and you see that with Maimonides too. And basically, when there's a newly evolved custom, I mean, he doesn't include that in the halacha, in the Jewish law, in his code Mishneh Torah. He sometimes says, oh, this is not based on anything. You have to stop this. So there is no innovation, right? In this, which has good and bad things, because innovation could actually be hard because people innovate a lot of stringencies that are unnecessary. But okay, innovations could also be interesting, creative. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
We found matters that have fallen into disarray and beneficial religious affairs that have become defective over many years and lengthy periods. Since we renewed these rites and practices into their former state, and the desired rituals and religious regulations to the best of our meager ability, it is as if we have revived them after death, because trace of them had vanished. Moreover, it seems as if we have recreated them, since knowledge of experience was so far removed.
Yeah. So he's saying, this is not bid'ah. Those are old rituals that we Jews had that were lost. And so I'm just reintroducing them. I refound them. I revived them back to life. And so this is not bid'ah. This is just reclaiming what was ours. Now, there's a second argument here. The second argument was, but those are not Jewish practices. These are practices done by other religions, and we're not supposed to imitate other religions. Well, thank you so much, Nathalie. It was a pleasure hearing you. Kevin, are you available? I don't know if he's here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you are here. Hi, Kevin. Good to hear you again. Would you like to read this, please?
Yeah, sure.
You can start with the black text, the lower text.
All right. Prostration is obligatory as is required by scripture, tradition, and reason. Scripture according to what I have already cited, tradition according to what I have explained, and reason because prostration is the highest form of outer worship.
So I don't all these. He has three sources: scripture, which is revelation, right? Tradition and reason is reason. So we had revelation and reason. There was the two important concepts of the Kalam, and then there's also Jewish tradition. Now, scripture. I'm not gonna. I didn't include that because it's a long expose of arguments, but there's a lot of texts in scripture that talk about prostration. That is true in the Hebrew Bible. Yeah, even though it wasn't tradition for a long time. Tradition, he says, we had that before, saying, yeah, the tradition was lost, but we're reviving an old tradition. This is not innovation. This is really okay. And reason is because, so that's the third pillar of his statements, because it's an expression of a high level of expression of outer worship. Look, if you just say, oh, in yourself, oh Lord, I totally surrender to you. That's nice. It's like an inner thing. But if you also do this, you there's a body language basically that strengthens supposedly your inner emotion. So yeah, that's the idea. Mm-hmm.
Now it is necessary that we clarify under what circumstances this is obligatory. It is obligatory for three purposes: for the glorification of his name, may he be exalted, for acknowledging his goodness and giving thanks for it, and for supplication for his mercy.
You see here, these are Jews, Yemenite Jews, that follow the Yemenite tradition. In Yemen, there were actually, as I said, there were people, if you remember, Maimonides had written a letter to the community of Yemen who weren't sure. They had been forced to convert to Islam under pressure. Were they allowed to go back to Judaism? And Maimonides supported them, encouraged them, and said, be proud of your heritage. They went back to Judaism because of him. And from that moment on, initially all the Jews of Yemen, but later, different groups got into in touch with different other influences. But there are, up to this day, but less and less. Most people stopped this when they moved to Israel and were exposed to other forms of Judaism. But for many centuries, they followed Maimonides in everything, including this. And this is also what Abraham Maimonides does, of course. But it seems that Maimonides has sources for this too. I hear from people, I know some people individually who follow these guidelines. But this is a photo of some people who follow Yemenite practices, and they practice this. Somebody, I think is a Facebook friend of mine, but because I never see his face, I don't know who it is. Okay, good. Counter argument 3. Since other religions have adopted this ritual, now it became forbidden to us. So there is the idea that, we Jews, we do not bow down anymore because it started with Christians taking it on, and then we didn't want to look like the Christians, and now we only pray standing. That's a story. I don't know if it's true. Probably, maybe not. But in any case, this is what people believe. So what does he say here as an answer?
If someone argues that this is prohibited because Muslims and Qaraites pray in this manner, answer him as follows. Christians pray in the direction of Jerusalem, yet we do not therefore prohibit praying in the direction of Jerusalem. The Muslims stand in prayer just as we stand. They bow from the waist just as we bow during certain blessings.
So it's not that Muslims only bow down, they only prostrate. They also bow from the waist, and so that is also what Jews do. They stand sometimes straight, and so we wouldn't be able to do that either. If it's everything that other people do, we have to stop. Then we just also have to stop praying because other religions pray. I mean, how far do you take that? So if it's our original tradition, we should keep it. Christians pray in the direction of Jerusalem, mostly not, but I believe traditional Egyptian Christians, and this was in Egypt, obviously, pray to Jerusalem. If I'm correct, if I'm correct,
Isn't that what argument number 2 was saying?
it's very similar, but
Like, isn't it saying that we shouldn't do it because the other religions do it?
yeah. So it's very similar. In the first argument, the people object because they say you're taking this from another religion. You're taking it from Muslims and from others. And there he said, no, he shows that this was originally Jewish. That's actually in the Torah. It's in the prayers, in the other holy books of the Jewish Bible. So it's not taken from the other religions. On the contrary, they took it from us. So that was the previous argument. Now this argument goes as follows. Okay, we agree that they had it from us, and we didn't. And okay, you're right. We didn't take it from their religion, from the other religions. But now they took it from us. So now it becomes a part of that other religion, and therefore now we cannot be like the other religion. So now we have to stop it. And that he says, but that's not an argument. When you say you cannot imitate other religions, it doesn't mean when they start acting like you have to stop it too. I mean, there are certain Christians called Seventh-day Adventists who keep the Sabbath. Are we then going to stop Shabbat? Of course not. So if they take on our traditions, we shouldn't stop it. It's only when we take it from them, because then we cannot pray at all, because other religions pray. We cannot, if certain Christians pray to Jerusalem, like the Christians in Egypt, that we cannot pray to Jerusalem. So that is nonsense. It is basically similar, but not exactly the same argument. Okay, Kevin.
The purpose of the law is
No.
that.
Now I want you to do the green letters too.
Oh, okay. The Muslims initially took these customs for us and preserved it. Thank God, so that we can now retrieve from what we have lost.
From them, what we have lost, right?
The purpose of the law is that the nations imitate us and follow our Torah, as a single nation follows its leader. And you shall be unto me a kingdom of priests. They can either follow us in the entire Torah, as will be the case in the longed-for messianic days, or in part of the Torah, as has occurred with some nations that have arisen after the giving of the Torah. So has it in fact transpired, such that our wisdom and beloved customs have been hidden from us and reappeared in other nations.
So he says, yeah. So he believes that when the Messiah comes, everybody's going to be Jewish. That is also something that not everybody believes, but he believes that. But if they want to just take on certain parts, just monotheism, or in this case, bowing down. This is just what they took on from us, and we should be proud of it, but not then abandon it. That doesn't make sense. Another argument is, prostration, maybe you're right. Maybe it is good to do. Maybe it is Jewish. But if it's only outward praying without even the inner emotion and the awareness of what it stands for, then it's just a show. So it would be good for only those people who really know what they're doing. This is only for the elected few, but not for everybody. What does he say? What is his answer there?
While it may be true that some worshippers do not have full concentration in prayer, or do not stand like a learned or pious person,
Man, there's the apple pie again, remember? Yeah.
or do not understand.
Piety? Remember pietist and piety?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Or do not understand the reason for facing the temple like one who is learned. It is nevertheless incumbent of all people without exception to prostrate, even if while prostrating one is not aware of the majesty of the one before whom he is bowing down. Even if at the moment of outwardly throwing one's face to the ground, one's heart is not trembling in presence of God.
Even if you don't really realize it, you don't have the feeling, it's still good to do it, because he's going to say, I mean, your feeling can drive you to the action of prostration, but the prostration can also activate that feeling. It could be both ways. By the way, those people in the pictures are Ethiopian Jews, also prostrate a lot. Okay, yeah.
A true confirmation of this is the Talmudic tradition that one should always immerse oneself in the Torah, even if it is for ulterior motives. For from an impure motive may come a pure motive.
So if you do it for ulterior motives, just for show or to fit into the community, or because you just find it aesthetically beautiful or whatever it is, yeah, but you can do it, but then the motivation comes afterwards.
The prostration of an ignorant person or a young child and them imitating someone who is older or nobler is therefore crucial, because from an impure motive one may come to a pure motive. The basic point is that worship is shared by all alike. Neither scripture nor reason justifies limiting it to the select few.
Yeah. Okay. Now, some people take this to the next level. Here is somebody, Facebook friend of mine, this is years ago. He studied in the yeshiva in Jerusalem, and he goes to the kotel to do prostration. And it needs a bit of courage because people have no idea what he's doing. But I'll show you a bit.
أذنوي صفثاي تفتوح وفي يجيز تهلو ثاخو باروخ أتا أذنوي ألوهينو وله أبثينو ألوهي أبراهام ألوهي يسحق وألوهي يعقوب وآل حق وذيل حق جبار وهنرو العليان جمال حصوذين طوبين وقناها كال زخير حسدي وباث مبيغ آل لبناء بناهن مالخ رحمون مشيع ومغن باروخ أتا أذنوي مغن أبراهام نذيم نحن لخ شأته أذنوي.
All right. That is enough. It's just unusual. Rachel, are you available? I think so, right?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. Good. So, okay. The third goal that Abraham tried to accomplish was
The establishment of a mystical movement. Its followers were called Hasidim, or pietists.
Yeah, so we see the word Hasidim means everybody who is a pietist, who is more than average dedicated and stuff, are called Hasidim. This is definitely very different from Hasidim that are known today. Very different. But what was it?
The movement had many parallels with Islamic Sufism.
Sufism is a form of Islamic mysticism. Now, what is mysticism? Mysticism, we're going to talk, when we talk about Kabbalah, we're going to talk about what mysticism is in general. But basically, mysticism is trying to be very close to God. Yeah.
The movement consisted of devotional groups striving for spiritual enlightenment. These groups were under the guidance of a sheikh, chacham. They held nightly sessions during which the followers meditated on God. Sufis practiced meditative singing called
Dhikr. Dhikr is an Arabic word. It's connected to zecher, but it doesn't just mean remembering, but also pronouncing it. So dhikr is a meditative singing of names of God usually. Mm-hmm.
It is not certain if this was also practiced by Rabbeinu Avram's movement. Extended periods of fasting.
I'm going to show you what the dhikr looks like. Yeah.
Here's a recording of a Sufi meditation sentence, a dhikr. It's not clear if Abraham Maimonides movement also organized dhikrs. A dhikr is practiced by saying
There's different kind of Sufis groups, and just like you have different kind of Hasidic groups, so dynasties and stuff, this is called Naqshbandi. But I'm going to just show you a little bit of it. Here you go. Can you hear it, by the way? Okay, sound?
ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب ولا يا الله 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 الله
So we don't know if he did that, but okay, maybe. We don't know. Okay, yeah, continue, please, Rachel.
Abraham argued that these Sufi practices were adopted from the old Israelite schools of prophets, Talmidei Nevi'im, in which dedicated people cleanse their souls through meditation in order to connect to God. We witness Sufis of Islam practicing spiritual discipline and restricting their sleep, which they perhaps derive from the sayings of David, I will give no sleep to my eyes or slumber to my eyelids, and I arise at midnight to give thanks to you, and other verses like these. It may also be discerned from the report of the messenger Moses of blessed memory regarding his seclusion in the mountain with the divine presence. I lay prostrate before the Lord for these 40 days and 40 nights, indicating that he was in the same state both day and night without sleeping or eating.
Yeah.
Take note of these marvelous traditions and grieve how they were transmitted from us to another religion and have disappeared from us. It is about such things that our sages of blessed memory remarked in their interpretation of the verse. If you heed God's word, my soul shall weep because of its pride. What is the meaning because of pride? Because of pride, Israel has been taken from them and given to the nations of the world.
Yeah, so this is all these things were ours, our precious, proud heritage and practices. We have lost it because of the diaspora, because of being kicked out. Our tradition was interrupted, and now we're retrieving it from the Muslims among us. There's another counter argument. Was this number 4? Is the teaching wrong? This is number 4. There's another counter argument. Some of these mystics are less observant. That is actually a complaint of religious people against mystics often. What does he say?
It is a grave error for a person to regard himself, or for another to regard him, as a pious person by avoiding marriage, or fasting continuously, or eating very little, or wearing wool, while being neglectful of the commandments, or while committing transgressions. There is a saying that you should consider, namely, voluntary prayers are like a donation, while the fulfillment of duties is like the payment of a debt. This is partially what is meant by the verse, he will not take a bribe.
Yeah, you cannot compensate the lack of your normal practice by doing all these extra things. So if people are less observant, then they're not really good Jewish Sufis, so to say. Mm-hmm.
O you who seek to rise to the level of the elect and pursue the special paths of the Lord, the paths of the pious of Israel and the disciples of the prophets, know that 10 years of fasting piously is squandered by eating a single piece of food that was stolen or robbed. Wearing wool and other clothing out of asceticism for your entire life is squandered by wearing a garment that requires fringes but without fringes.
So yeah, if you have these images, you have like something around you, a cloak or something that has 4 corners, you need to put these fringes on, otherwise you're actually violating. Mm-hmm.
Years of solitude in the mountains is squandered by living in a house that requires a mezuzah but without a mezuzah. By God, only if you fail any of these by accident, oversight, or coercion can you hope to be forgiven.
Yeah.
In addition, it must additionally be mentioned in this context what is required of every individual when he is alone in his prayer space at home. It is required that he has a designated place and that this place be in accordance with his living conditions and his place of residence, whether it is part of his home or that is set apart for this purpose, or a corner of his house that is preserved for this, according to his possibility.
If you don't pray in a synagogue, have a dedicated place in your house, or if not, just a rug. Mm-hmm.
The mat or carpet he sits on for prayer should be pure and clean, and if it is possible that he can have it specially reserved for this purpose, then how much the better. This place or corner should be preserved not only from disrepair and filth, but also from dust and the like. Whatever is added to this and any special care that is shown is a sign of greater regard for his devotion to God, may he be exalted, and it provides greater preparation and sincerity of concentration and the strengthening of the fear of God.
So basically his followers had prayer rugs, just like Muslims. So it was basically a Jewish form of Islam, very much. Rigorous training, they had sleep deprivation, and that's like a training. Long fasts, even for some, even on Shabbat. Sometimes they went into 40-day retreats in the desert, and they would focus much on the soul at the expense of the body. He also believed that you should have a core group, that they should form a monastery-like community. So introduction of some kind of monks or hermits that would spend their lives fasting and praying and inspire others to become more pious. This never happened, but that was one of his goals. He was too busy with his leadership roles to do this. But he also believed that such a movement would pave the way towards the restoration of prophecy. Now, this movement lasted for 250 years under the Maimonides family. Abraham's son Obadiah wrote a book, for instance, the Treatise of the Poor, with the similar teachings. Now, some Torah commentaries from Abraham Maimonides. Okay, please continue.
For Genesis 1:26, let us make a man after our image and likeness.
We already saw that this is a problematic text. Rashi struggled with it, and that's why I took the same example, because you're familiar with this text. There's a problem, like, why does it say, let us make a man, as if God is plural? Christians have used this to argue for the Trinity, after our image and likeness. So he says this is a problem, for let us make in the plural.
Abraham gives the same explanation as Maimonides. The plural refers to celestial intermediaries who are in some way involved with the creation of man.
Very different explanation from Rashi, of course. So God has created man through the forces in the universe that he himself, of course, generated, but it is through natural processes. So we might now say, maybe this means in our day and age, if Maimonides is true, that maybe God created man through the laws of evolution, maybe, or the Big Bang, etc. So that would be an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah?
Let's make man is the plural to imply that God exalted as he, who alone is the creator, brought about this formation of man via the spiritual world.
Yeah, spiritual world are basically these forces, right, that you can't see. Well, you can't see gravity, you can't see electricity, all these things. So this is maybe what we call physical forces, maybe. Yeah. And then the second one is, why is it image and likeness? Because God doesn't have an image. How can he say, let us create man in our image and likeness? Okay.
For in truth, he is beyond any comparison. This problem, too, Abraham Maimonides explains in the same way as his father. According to the Maimonides, father and son, image and likeness signifies man's noble status in the creation. The meaning of the terms image and likeness is that man is distinguished as he is a speaking creature who can comprehend his master and creator and understands human perfectibility as explained in the guide. But he also adds, in his image does not refer to the physical matter, nor material that can be examined by one's intelligence. Therefore, one cannot determine its true nature. For man himself, is even the wisest, when he contemplates his own soul, cannot know its true essence.
Yeah, so we cannot really know what it means, is God's image, but maybe it means that we have capability of reasoning and understanding certain things. Yeah, Genesis 25, verse 17 talks about Ishmael. Now, we talked about Ishmael, right? That's the forefather of the Arabs. So when he says something about Ishmael in everybody's mind in this day and age, in this world, also was connected to Islam. So what does he say about, what does Genesis 25, verse 17 say?
It tells us of Ishmael's death. He was gathered to his people, and these were the years of his life. The Talmud's view on Ishmael is predominantly negative, even though there are also some opinions that at some point in life he repented.
Yeah, what does he say?
Abraham Maimonides, however, rejected the rabbinic view in favor of a different interpretation based on the context of the wording. This shows how beloved Ishmael was, and therefore the length of his life is specified.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah.
And the words he gathered to his people indicates that he reached a high level in the hereafter.
So meaning he's saying Ishmael, this means Ishmael was on a high level. So it's a kind of a appreciation of Islam at the same time.
Rabbeinu Abraham sees in this words indication of Ishmael's character and spiritual destiny. Ishmael, it seems, was loved on high and reached a high spiritual level. Although most Jewish women avoid transgressing, a woman shall not wear men's apparel, some, because of their foolishness, are ensnared by it. In celebrations, they dress up like Gentiles. In this abomination, the woman wears a man's turban or a hat and dances in front of both men and women with a sword in her hand. It is inconceivable that because one is a bride, she is permitted to transgress a prohibition in the Torah. Their only possible rationalization is that they are practicing and accepting custom the same way that they justify other things. This was practiced in Fustat, and prominent families committed this error until we eliminated it and blotted out all traces of it.
You read this. What do you think of this?
I mean, I've heard of the prohibition before.
Oh, you heard of this, actually?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the prohibition of
yeah,
transgressing in a way?
Yeah.
They use it against girls
But
not
it also
wearing
seems similar to a lot of
pants, right?
customs that
What?
I don't know. It seems similar to a lot of customs that people have at weddings nowadays, where people like dress up in silly costumes in order to sort of bring joy to the couple.
Right. So that was already the case. But now they say you cannot wear men's clothing, and they tell girls not to wear pants. Usually, isn't that what happens?
That's the problem. They say don't wear pants because it's like men wear pants and women never wore pants.
Oh, shall me tell you something? Pants were actually originally invented for women. The first who wore pants were women because you can never look under your skirt. You had these harem pants that actually close at the leg, so it's actually more sneot, basically, so to say, more because you cannot, if they're loose pants and stuff, you cannot. There's the wind cannot blow up your skirt, so that's why. And much later, men started wearing pants. It was actually initially strange for men to wear pants. So you see that everything is culturally dictated. And to be honest, when I was young, a long time ago, I remember, I think it was 6 or something. I have an aunt who is much younger, as young, and she's only 6 years older than me. So I was walking, and she was wearing pants, and this is in the village. And we're walking, and there were some boys who says, "Ah, look, a girl with pants." That was very unusual in those days. But then now you wouldn't look like, oh, wow, this woman is wearing pants. Maybe you wear like how do you call it, a striped suit, and a tie as a girl. That looks masculine, right? But certain pants are not. So if everything is determined really by what is the custom at the time, personally, I don't think that all pants are by definition male dress at all. I mean, yeah. So now if a man would wear a dress, that is definitely transgressing. But in the olden days, robes were, it's almost like dresses. Men were wear robes, right? So in any case, but this was a custom. It was a custom, and he's look. I have a lot of appreciation for Maimonides and for his son too. I think it's very creative. He wants to be creative. He wants to take in things into the liturgy that are meaningful for him and that help maybe heighten the awareness or the spiritual experience through prostration. I appreciate that. It's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful custom in the first place. But then, at the other hand, he's also they're so systematic, as we saw already, that for him there's no space for any custom that, even though it's just like everybody knows when somebody at a party is dancing with a turban and a sword, that is the bride. So now this is how you see the bride. So this is the custom of the bride. No, he doesn't have. Doesn't have patience for that. This is against law. Over with it, and he stopped it. So he was actually very powerful. Actually, during his life, he was probably more influential than Maimonides, than his father. And he wrote tons of books, but a lot of it was in Arabic, and so we wasn't really dispersed much about among other communities. And later, everybody focused on Maimonides and not so much on him anymore. But in his lifetime and in his community, he was more powerful and more influential than his father. In any case, this was actually our last slide. So an interesting character, right? It's a very interesting movement, very unusual. Sylvia?
I feel like his teachings would be like against what Rambam would have said.
Why?
Like, I feel like because some of this stuff it's not all like from the meditation and the sleep deprivation, fasting, like if anything that goes against what the Torah says. The Torah is all about self-care and not make yourself fast.
Good point. It's an interesting point. Yeah, I wonder, look, for sure, Abraham never thought he was going against his father. That's for sure. He didn't think so. But you still have a good point, because Maimonides was always about balance, right? He didn't think you should sleep deprived, but you also shouldn't sleep too much. So maybe if the sleep deprivation, I wrote that word down, he didn't say it, but limiting your sleep. I find it, look, I need a lot of sleep. So for me, sleeping little is sleep deprivation, but maybe not for everybody. Some people don't need a lot of sleep. And maybe it's for people who really don't need sleep and just want to limit it. So maybe the way I wrote it was too harsh. Maybe limiting of sleep, maybe.
But like it only says like you should limit yourself with the amount of meat and wine you drink and the amount of horses you have, and just so you're not consumed in yourself and unaware of everything else. Not like this
No,
is
I think that sleep deprivation is really, to be honest, is a typical feature of cults. So when people are very sleep deprived, and you see that in cults, and I've been in similar and like evangelical cults a bit, where we had nights of prayer. So you try to stay up as long as you can, everybody, nights of prayer. Well, you don't think the next day as clearly. You're easily manipulable, you know? So if people, a lot of cults have sleep deprivation, supposedly for spirituality, but it's always like if they have sleep, if they have, they sleep not enough, then I've like, ooh, what kind of a movement is this? Now, this is common. I don't think Abraham did it to manipulate people consciously. I don't think so. I think he was a very sincere person. But it's true. It's not good it's not balanced. So it's true. I agree with you. If maybe Maimonides would have agreed, but then I would say, I don't like to, what you're telling me about balance, that seems to go, and which is very philosophically based, as it doesn't seem to go with balance. Balance is that you have enough, whatever your body needs. You have to sleep, and not less and not more, right? Yeah, I agree. This is a very good point, Sylvia. Thank you. Sure. Anyone else? If not, then next class, so time flies, is going to be about what we call the Maimonidean controversy. So that'll be very interesting, I think. And then, so I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I hope to see you.